In February 2016, someone tried to steal almost $1 billion from a country's central bank, and for a few hours, it worked. $951 million in payment orders were moving out of Bangladesh Bank's account at the Federal Reserve in New York, routed to anonymous accounts on the other side of the world. No alarm went off. No vault was broken. The thieves were already inside the system, sending instructions the bank itself appeared to have approved. What stopped them wasn't a security team or a firewall. It was a single misspelled word, and a coincidence no one could have planned. This is the story of one of the most sophisticated bank heists ever attempted, and how it was undone by a typo. It began, of all places, with a broken printer. To understand February 2016, you have to go back a full year. In January 2015, employees at Bangladesh Bank received emails from a polite job seeker who called himself Russell Alam. Attached was a CV. At least one person opened it, and that file quietly installed a backdoor into the bank's network. And then, nothing happened. For almost a year. This is the first thing most versions of this story get wrong. This was not a smash and grab. The intruders didn't break a window and grab the cash. They moved in and they waited. For months they watched, learning how the staff worked, which systems they used, when people came and went, and exactly how money left the building. They were studying, and what they were studying was SWIFT. SWIFT is the messaging network banks around the world use to tell each other to move money. It is not the money itself, it's the trusted instruction. When a bank sends a SWIFT message, other banks act on it because the network is considered secure. And it is. SWIFT itself was never hacked. What the attackers stole were Bangladesh Bank's own credentials, the keys to send messages as the bank. From the outside, everything they sent would look completely legitimate. The instructions would be real. Only the people giving them would be fake. But they needed one more thing. They needed the bank not to notice, not for minutes, but for days. So they built a piece of software for exactly that and hid it deep inside the bank's SWIFT system. We'll come back to what it did because when researchers finally pulled it apart, it told them almost everything. Meanwhile, 3,000 kilometers away, the exits were already prepared. Back in May of 2015, 9 months before a single dollar moved, 4 ordinary accounts had been opened at one bank branch in Manila. Each held $500. Then they were abandoned, untouched, waiting. Remember them. On the evening of Thursday, February 4th, 2016, the waiting ended. The attackers logged in one last time and fired off their 35 payment orders to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, where Bangladesh keeps billions of dollars on deposit. Move the money, the instructions said, from New York out to Asia. Then they were gone, in and out in hours. And here their real weapon shows itself, not the malware, the calendar. Look at the timing. Thursday evening in Dhaka is the start of the weekend. In Bangladesh, the offices close Friday and Saturday. So when the orders reached New York on Friday and Fed staff had questions, they sent those questions to Dhaka, where no one was working. By the time Bangladesh came back on Sunday, New York had gone home for its own weekend. And when the money reached its final stop, Manila, the banks there were closed too, for Chinese New Year. Every single handoff landed in a gap. Every question arrived at a closed door. This wasn't luck, it was engineered. A route drawn straight through the seams between 3 time zones. A window nobody could close because nobody was awake at the same time. And in Dhaka, that dead printer meant the one system built to shout, "Something is wrong," stayed silent. The confirmations that should have printed in real time never appeared. For 4 days, the theft was invisible. Not because no one was watching, but because the alarm had been quietly unplugged. By any reasonable plan, the attackers should have taken all of it. They didn't. And the reason comes down to 2 small things, the kind no one can plan for. The first was a coincidence. At the New York Fed, as the transfers processed, an automated system pulled 30 of them aside for review. Not because anyone suspected a heist, because of a single word. One of the payment orders listed an address on Jupiter Street in Manila, and Jupiter happened to match the name of a shipping company on an American sanctions list, a company tied to Iran. That word tripped a filter that had nothing to do with fraud. 30 transfers froze, $850 million, stopped by a street name. The second was a spelling mistake. One transfer, $20 million, was on its way to an account in Sri Lanka in the name of the Shalika Foundation, except whoever typed the order misspelled it. Foundation became Fandation, F-A-N-D-A-T-I-O-N. A routing bank in Germany, Deutsche Bank, caught the error and paused to ask about it. A bank in Sri Lanka separately decided $20 million was an awful lot for a small foundation. Between them, that transfer was reversed. So let's be precise, because this is exactly where most tellings blur together. The attackers attempted to steal $951 million. Because of that sanctions filter, only $101 million ever moved. The Sri Lanka transfer, $20 million, was clawed back, which left $81 million gone. And that $81 million is where this stops being a hacking story and becomes something much older, a story about following the money. But step back for a moment, because there's a question hanging over all of this. This was a central bank. How does almost $1 billion nearly walk out the door? Part of the answer is that Bangladesh Bank made it easy. Investigators later found the machines connected to the SWIFT network were also wired straight into the bank's ordinary network and out to the open internet. There was no firewall between them worth the name. The switches routing that traffic were cheap second-hand units. For a system moving billions of dollars, the front door had effectively been left open, and the intruders had spent a year memorizing the layout of the house. The other part is harder to swallow, because at the New York Fed, almost nothing went wrong. When the 35 orders first arrived, the Fed's systems actually did reject them. The formatting was off. A required field about the receiving bank was missing, but the instructions were properly signed with Bangladesh Bank's real credentials, so they were resubmitted, and this time correctly formatted and correctly authenticated, they were accepted, because that is the entire premise of the network. A valid instruction is a trusted instruction. That's the uncomfortable truth at the center of this case. The Fed wasn't fooled by a break-in. It was handed genuine keys, and it did what it is designed to do. SWIFT would later make the same point bluntly. The network is only as secure as each bank's own systems, and securing those systems is the bank's job, not SWIFT's, which means the safeguards that actually stood between these men and $1 billion weren't firewalls or fraud algorithms. They were a printer that should have raised the alarm, a clerk in Sri Lanka who thought a number looked too big, and a sanctions filter that flagged the wrong thing for the right reason. Everything designed to stop this had been anticipated. Only the accidents hadn't. Follow it then. The $81 million went to the Philippines, to 4 accounts at the Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation, RCBC, in Manila. The same 4 accounts opened 9 months earlier with $500 each. The names on them, Cruz, La Grosas, Vergara, Vasquez, were fake. At the Jupiter Street branch, the manager, Maya Santos Digito, pushed the funds through. When Bangladesh finally sent a frantic message begging the bank to freeze everything, it arrived during the Chinese New Year holiday, and by the time anyone acted, around $58 million had already been pulled out. What happened next is the reason we know any of this in such detail, because the Philippines did something unusual. It put the whole thing on television. For weeks in the spring of 2016, the Philippine Senate's Blue Ribbon Committee dragged everyone it could find in front of the cameras. Digito testified that she had only followed instructions from above and said she feared for her family. The bank's president stepped down, insisting he'd done nothing wrong. Remittance agents, casino bosses, and businessmen accused each other in real time, under oath on live national broadcast. It was extraordinary. A money laundering trail being reconstructed in public, one reluctant witness at a time. The country's central bank fined RCBC 1 billion pesos, about $21 million, the largest penalty it had ever handed down. Mia Santos Digito would later be convicted of money laundering. But even as the hearings exposed how the money had entered the Philippines, they ran into a wall on the only question that really mattered. Where had it gone? The answer is that it was designed to be unanswerable. From those RCBC accounts, the money was converted out of dollars and into Philippine pesos through a remittance company called Philrem. It was funneled through the account of a trading company and a businessman named William Go, who insisted his identity had simply been stolen and used. And from there, it flowed into the one industry in the country built to erase a paper trail: casinos. At the time, Philippine casinos were exempt from the country's money laundering laws. Money that walked onto a gaming floor essentially left the financial system. So that's exactly where the 81 million went, into high roller rooms at resorts like Solaire and Midas, and to a junket operator called Eastern Hawaii Leisure. Dirty electronic transfers went in. Anonymous casino chips came out, and chips played for a while and cash back in become clean, untraceable currency. Some of it briefly surfaced. A junket operator named Kim Wong handed roughly $15 million back to authorities and pointed at two Chinese associates, Gao and Ding, as the men who had brought the money in and set the accounts up. But by the time investigators wanted them, Gao and Ding had boarded flights to Macau, the gambling enclave that is also North Korea's best-known financial doorway to the outside world. Another gambler, a high roller named Wei Kang-shu, had received tens of millions in cash. He simply vanished and has never been found. Follow the 81 million far enough, and it stops being money at all. It becomes a stack of chips on a table in Manila, and then it becomes nothing you can trace. The trail doesn't end, it dissolves. So if the money left no trace, what did? The code. Remember that software hidden inside the bank's SWIFT system? In April 2016, security researchers at BAE Systems published what they'd found, and it was a small masterpiece of malice. They called it Trojan Bound Swift. Its job was to make a theft invisible from the inside. When the bank's SWIFT software tried to confirm a transaction, the malware intercepted it. It read the confirmations, quietly deleted the fraudulent ones from the bank's own database, and altered the balances on screen so the numbers still added up. Then it took the paper trail, the printed confirmations that should have exposed everything, and killed them at the source. That was the broken printer, not a glitch, a feature. One detail captures the whole thing. Researchers found that the core of the attack came down to rewriting 2 bytes of code, 2 characters, inside a single file, just enough to switch off one security check. 2 characters against $951 million. The software sat inside the bank, watched the crime happen, and rewrote the evidence in real time. But the people who built it made one quiet mistake. They reused their tools. Inside BandSwift, researchers found a rare, distinctive routine for wiping files clean, and they had seen that exact code before. In the malware that had torn through Sony pictures in 2014, a tool investigators called Destover. That was the thread. And when they pulled it, it didn't lead to a lone hacker or a criminal gang. It led to a government. The group at the end of that thread had a name by them: Lazarus. For years, investigators had been tracking a set of tools and techniques showing up across attacks all over the world and attributing them to a single cluster working on behalf of North Korea. The Sony hack, retaliation for a comedy about assassinating the country's leader, was theirs. So was WannaCry, the ransomware that froze hospitals and companies across the globe in 2017. And the same fingerprints were now on Bangladesh. In 2018, the United States made it official. The Justice Department charged a North Korean programmer, Park Jin-hyuk, laying out in a lengthy complaint how the same people, the same code, and the same infrastructure connected the Sony attack, WannaCry, and the Bangladesh heist. A later indictment named 2 more men and tied all 3 to a unit of North Korean military intelligence, a state hacking division tasked in part with simply stealing money for the regime. Now, 2 honest caveats, because this is where a serious account earns its trust. Not every researcher agreed the picture was clean. Some noted signs that more than one group may have been inside Bangladesh bank systems at once. And North Korea, as always, denies all of it. The bank, Sony, WannaCry, everything. But here is the line worth drawing carefully. The trail into Manila's casinos is documented in court records, in Senate hearings, in bank statements. The final step, the money reaching Pyongyang, is an inference, a strong one, built on how North Korea has moved money through places like Macau before, but an inference. And that honesty is the point, because the story doesn't need to be exaggerated. What actually happened is alarming enough, because Bangladesh wasn't an endpoint, it was a prototype. Think about what North Korea learned in those months: how to sit inside a financial system unseen, how to move stolen money through jurisdictions that don't cooperate, how to turn a network's own trust against it. Then watch them take that education and point it at a softer, faster, richer target: cryptocurrency. In 2022, hackers tied to the same operation drained around $620 million from a blockchain behind a video game, Axie Infinity. In February 2025, the FBI says they stole roughly $1.5 billion from a single crypto exchange, Bybit, the largest theft of any kind in the history of the internet. In April 2026, nearly 300 million more from a platform called Kelp DAO. By 2026, investigators estimated North Korean hackers were behind around 3/4 of all cryptocurrency stolen worldwide. Money that analysts believe flows straight back to a sanctioned state in its weapons programs. Since 2017, the running total attributed to them passed $6 billion. As for the original 81 million, it was never truly recovered. In September 2025, almost 10 years later, a court in Dhaka finally ordered the money confiscated from RCBC. By then, of course, it was long gone. So look back at how close it came to $1 billion. What stopped it wasn't a firewall or a genius investigator. It was a sanctioned ship that happened to share a name with the street, and a thief who couldn't spell foundation. The men who did this were patient enough to wait a year and precise enough to rob a central bank through its own software. And they were undone by 2 accidents no one could have planned. They left almost nothing behind. A few lines of borrowed code, 1 misspelled word, because in the end, every case leaves a trace, even this one. The money is the only thing that didn't.